Hello, in this tutorial we'll be learning about the concepts of property binding, that is data binding, and event binding. So there are a couple of ways to bind data in Angular. There are four types of bindings were available in Angular 1, but now in Angular 2 the syntax has changed a bit. So here I am classified binding into two parts, that is data binding and event binding, and data binding again classified into three parts, that is interpolation, one-way binding, that is unidirectional, and two-way, that is bidirectional binding. Now let's take one by one. First is interpolation. So interpolation is easiest and best known way of data binding. In Angular 1 we are writing person.name under this curly braces, and in Angular 2 it's same, there is no difference. So we have interpolation both in Angular 1 and in Angular 2 as well. Now one-way data binding. So the way we used to apply one-way data binding in Angular 1 is with the help of ngbind directive. So just like this, we have ngbind directive and binds person.name property to this h1 tag. So this is exactly what interpolation ends up to look like. Anyway, in Angular 2, we can use square brackets round the property we want to bind to. So this may look a bit strange at first, but it's definitely a valid HTML. We actually can take any HTML property like inner text, inner HTML, wrap it in a square braces, and you can then bind it to a model. So this could, for example, also works on style properties. Now, two-way data binding. So the most used use case of two-way data binding in Angular is using it on an input field or any other form element. So in Angular 1, we would use the ngModel directive on the element and bind it to the value like this, input type text, and bind this message property to this ngModel directive. When we type something in the input, on the one side the value goes to the controller and then back and forth. So this is how we achieve in Angular 1. And in Angular 2 we also have a special directive called ngModule like this. So this is how we write in Angular 2. So but notice how the syntax is changed a bit different. We use the square brackets because it's a property, but we also have use the parenthesis. This syntax is called banana in a box. So what this means, that when you see this syntax, it's a two-way data binding. Also in Angular 2 they dropped the conversion of splitting of words with dashes and use camel cases instead. And the last type of binding is event binding. You can do event binding with any valid HTML event available, like click, focus, or blur, etc. In Angular 1, you should need built-in directive to use Angular events. For example, here the ngClick directive defines AngularJS code that will be executed when the button is being clicked. So in Angular 2, we can write this code like this. Here we can just take the same property that one is on HTML element and wrap it in a parenthesis. So with property we use square brackets, but with the events we use parenthesis. Here I want to emphasize that Angular 2 uses HTML element events, and it dropped tons of directives like ngClick, ngblur, etc. And I think it's a great choice. So now let's dive into the implementation of binding in our app. So yeah. So in the previous tutorial, we bind this name property of this app component class to name, to this name under this curly braces. So this is the example of interpolation. And now let's achieve this with the help of objects. So I'm creating a person object here and say name Harsh, and in the template I change name attribute to person dot name. Now let's run this. I got the output hello from Harsh. Yeah. So this is the example of interpolation again. Now let's talk about one-way data binding. So for that I'm writing paragraph tag here and binds this person.name to this inner HTML attribute of this paragraph tag of HTML equals person dot name. Now in the browser I got the Harsh here. Yeah, it's running fine. So remember, here you can provide only the valid HTML attribute like inner HTML, inner text, etc. Let's suppose I remove this and change it to something, some random like inner HTML, say. And when I reload this browser, it is not running. I got some error in the console. Yeah, that inner HTML is not known property of P. So if you are providing the, now let's suppose I change this to text. So this is a valid HTML attribute. Then reload the browser and it is running fine. Yeah, I got the result again. So this is how the one-way binding works in Angular 2, and we can add these styling attributes here. So for that I add one more property in person object, say color red, and in the span I bind style dot background color. So this is a HTML attribute of this span tag, and bind this person dot color to this attribute. So for that I bind this attribute under this square brackets and say some text. Yeah, now let's reload, and as you see I got the some text and the background color is red. So this is how we can achieve one-way data binding with the help of styling and simple inner attributes. Now let's talk about the two-way data binding. So it is used in input form elements. So I'm writing input type text, and here say ng model equals, and bind this model to the property called message. So this is the syntax of two-way data binding. Now let's declare the property called message, and I'm assigning the empty string here to this message. Now let's interpolate this message in the next line, say message. Now let's reload, and it is not running. As you can see, I got some error like ng model. It's not a known property of this input. So for that, Angular need to know about that this is the ng model. So for that, you need to include a forms module in your module. So I'm importing this forms module from Angular /form. Yeah, and adding this forms module to this imports array. Now let's again reload the browser, and yeah, it is working fine. Now I am writing some text here. Let's say this is message. So as you can see, it binds this message properly. So this is how we can achieve in Angular 2 a two-way data binding. So it is necessary to add forms module in our root module. Now the last is event binding. So for that, I'm creating a button and binding a click event and method say hi. So this method is invoked when we click on this button, and name this button say hi. Under this app component class, I'm writing the method say hi here. So let's define this method, and under this I'm writing some piece of code like say console.log and print something message say hi from Harsh again. Now let's reload the browser and open the console window here. So when we click on say hi, I got the hi from Harsh again message here. So it is displaying message here. Now let's close this. So this is how the event binding in Angular 2 works. So this is how we can bind all our events. Now let's change this message, this dot message. Now let's reload again, and suppose if I write this message, any message here, like where are you, and say hi, click on say hi. So I got the message like say hi from Harsh again, and message is where are you. This is how we can get the values. So this is how we can implement all types of data binding in Angular 2. And one more thing which I need to tell you, that if you want to run this application on any other server, so for that you need to first generate .js file or JavaScript file with corresponding to this TypeScript file. So first generate this JavaScript files and then load it on any other server which you like. So here WebStorm provides me its default server, so let's run this application onto its server. Let's click on this Chrome icon. Now my application is loading. Yeah, as you can see, this application is running on its WebStorm server, and this is on this light server. So here, and you can build this application or you can run this application on any other server which you like. So that's it, guys. See you in the next tutorial. I hope you understand what the concepts of data binding. Thanks for watching.